You're listening to ESOPOD, the Foliance ESOP podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me on ESOPOD. I am your host, Sean Hoy, and today I am joined by the Manager of Engineering and Research and Development at Lifeline Emergency Vehicles, Jake Spiegal. How you doing?
I am doing good, Sean. Thank you.
How's everything up in Sumner?
It's wonderful. It's a little humid. It keeps acting like it's going to rain, but it hasn't quite rained. So I figure we're due for it.
Yeah, it seems like that's been the case for the last couple of weeks. It's just like
There's
humidity
something about
over
Sumner
and
when a
over.
big storm rolls through. Just before it gets to Sumner, it kind of breaks apart, and we miss out on all the good stuff. So,
Yep. So, for folks who don't know who you are, who might work at the Gazette or Cimarron or anywhere else in the company, maybe even at Lifeline, people who don't know you, can you give a little background as who you are, what you do, where you came from?
my name's Jake Spiegal. I've been with Lifeline since 2010. I previously worked for Schneider Electric in Cedar Rapids, and I spent 17 years working there. I came up here just shortly after Terry Leisher passed away, and at that time, Lifeline was in 3 separate buildings. And when you look back on it, what we do now, we were doing then in 3 separate buildings. It's like, how did we ever get anything accomplished? And it's just amazing to see how far we've come, how far Lifeline has come in 14 years that I've been here. So I generally get involved in engineering questions when they have things that are new, things that aren't working. I also handle all the 3D printing of pieces and parts that we use, and so that's kind of what I do. I research things and I answer questions to when a dealer says, "Can we put this in?" It generally runs through me to say, "Yeah, we can do it," or "No, we can't," and this is the reason why.
So you came from a electrical background
I
primarily?
did. My degree is in mechanical engineering, but when I started here, they said, "Well, Schneider Electric's electrical, so he must know electrical," and so I got stuck kind of in the electrical side. And it's been good. We've gotten to do a lot of things on the electrical side. When I first came here, we had the 850 system, which was the electrical system that they were implementing, and we had to design a new one because it wasn't working. They had a lot of issues with it, and they needed a replacement. And so we architected the Gen 2 system, and now we're using the Gen 3 system. So it's been real sturdy and real stable for the last 10 years.
So it sounds like there definitely been changes in how an ambulance is actually engineered and put together. How do you make an ambulance?
Uh, you take a moving truck and you throw cabinets in it. The That's what everybody seems to think an ambulance is. It's a moving van with lights on the outside and a sick person on the inside. The Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of involvement in standards and testing and a lot of those things that automotive companies, the big 3, they all have to comply with. Those things are starting to roll out into the ambulance world, and we've got to test the things. That's why we have to do a lot of testing. The cabinets have to hold a certain number of pounds. Everything's got to be tested to make sure it's not going to break loose or fly loose or injure an occupant. And how do we make an ambulance? Everything we do is custom. Every truck we build has been signed off by a customer, and it's their custom design. If you want a pink ambulance, we'll build you a pink ambulance. They choose a chassis, and we've built on virtually every chassis you can imagine. So we even built the University of Minnesota truck, which was huge, and it was on, I believe, a Peterbilt chassis. So we start with the chassis, and the chassis determines what size and what options and what you can do. By far, the most popular is the Ford chassis. We do some Dodge, we do some Chevy. Not a lot, but most of it's Ford ENF is what the common chassis is. And from there, it's what the customer wants. How many compartments do they want? What color interior? What color laminate? What color paint? and they EMS personnel have a tendency to be kind of religious when it comes to layouts and where things are at. And usually, once a service has a layout that everybody likes, they kind of stick with that. They may update the body, but they kind of stick with that layout. So we that's what we do.
So aside from the chassis, it's really sounds like it's starting from scratch almost every
Yeah,
time
I
as
mean,
far as
we
the box.
from an engineering standpoint, they will take a truck that is either their customer's previous truck or very similar to, and they'll start with that as kind of a starting point. They'll copy that over, and then they'll start working through that. They don't start a brand new CAD assembly every time they build an ambulance. A lot of times it starts as a copy of a previous truck.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned you do a lot of 3D printing. I have a 3D printer back here somewhere that I've messed around with. I know Cimarron also does some engineering 3D printing. How do you use that in the design process?
Uh, the first thing we use it for is they want a widget. They want to test if something's going to fit. They want to, they're curious about something. So we design it up, we print it, we go, yeah, that'll work, or no, it won't work. And if it'll work, like one real common thing we do is trying to see if I've got one here on the outlets that we install in the action areas in ambulances. Some of the new outlets have the little USB charging ports on the side of them. Well, they're deep enough that it's hard to get that and all the wiring in behind it. So we print out a shim that allows you to shim that outlet out just a little bit and the cover plate so that you can contain that whole piece. We have certain cameras that go on the outside of the body that, depending on where the camera placement is, it may be directly over a scene light or directly over an emergency light, and we have to shim that camera out just a little bit to keep the reflection from the light from coming up and affecting the camera. Uh, we do we can do things with air conditioning that we never could before. We can have like we've got the street side air conditioner which runs down the street side of the truck and blows out from one side. We couldn't do that if we were having to manually fabricate all the ducting pieces. Right now we print all those pieces. They bolt on, they hook up, and it works like a charm.
So you're using it both to test
Mm-hmm.
new pieces, troubleshoot, but
Yep.
also to like actually use on the
Yep.
trucks. Cool. That's
And
awesome.
I mean, in a dream world, I would love to have one of the new metal sintering machines that uses it's a 3D printer, but it uses a laser and metal powder to print metal parts. It's they're big change, and it's a little
Yeah.
tough to justify something that prints in metal, but it's cool technology, and there's you know it's doing nothing but growing and growing and growing. The things that they can print nowadays, I mean, they print houses now, and that's the amazing
Yeah.
part about the technology.
Yeah, it's only going to get better for
Yep.
sure until we have Star Trek just
Mm-hmm.
materialize something. So, do you print a lot of stuff and then hand it off to the shop and they'll fabricate it out of metal
Uh,
sometimes? Or is it,
Not usually. Usually, it comes down to the geometry of it is such that we can't fabricate it, and machining a one-off piece would be egregiously expensive. And so we make it out, and most of the materials we print with are what they consider engineering materials. You've got PETG, you've got a number of these materials that structurally, if you design your part right, they're good and strong, and so that's what we do a lot of pieces out of is that engineering grade material, and it's UV stable, and the exterior finish is nice, so it works out.
gosh, so it's a result of the highly custom design
Yep,
process that you have
yep.
right now. Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
Um,
So, you said you do a lot of research
yeah.
on what the customers want.
A
How
good
far out
example
are
is we
you?
had a dealer that a lot of times we put camera systems on the outside of the truck, and we refer to them as a 360 system, which means you've got cameras on all four sides. So and those 3D camera or those those aerial view camera systems will knit all those camera views together and give you a bird's eye 360 view of your ambulance. There's a company out there that makes one that we haven't used before, and we had one of our dealers come up and say, "Hey, can we use this company's camera system?" And so I looked at it. My boss Dan and we looked at it. I went through the specs, and it's no different than any of the rest of them. And I said, "Yeah, we can get one in and test it, make sure it does what we need it to, but there's no reason we can't use it." So that's one of the things. It's a lot of it is we've never done this before, or I get or Cheryl from parts will call me and say, "We're being told that this part is obsolete, can't get it anymore. We've been buying it for a Brazilian years. Now we have to find a replacement." And we go and I go out and I find either an alternative source or a new replacement that's got updated production values on it.
I know Cimarron does a thing where they go to trade
Mm-hmm.
shows and they show off their products. Does Lifeline have a similar
We
event
do.
that
They
happens?
For years and years we went to FDIC, which is it's not Federal Depositors Insurance Corporation like you see on a bank. It's the Fire Department Instructors Conference, and it's held every year in Indianapolis. And it is the anybody having anything remotely to do with fire and EMS is there. Pierce Fire Apparatus usually has a huge booth. They've got aerial trucks. The other thing it gives is they open up the show to everybody on, I believe it's Thursday. But that week prior to that, if your fire department wants, vehicle extrication training, if they want vehicle fire training, they want corn bin training, they want any of those types of training that, if you're from a small town, you may not have access to, those fire departments can go to that instructors conference and they've got training on virtually everything having to do with fire. And so it gives them an opportunity, gives people a chance to train and see get updated training materials all in one place and get it from instructors who've been doing it a long time. And so FDIC is kind of the big one. The other one is they have a World EMS Expo, and it kind of travels around. It's strictly supposed to be EMS, but again, like FDIC, there's people there that you're like, how are they connected to fire and EMS? But they're there. And we started going to the World EMS Expo probably 3 or 4 years ago, and so that's been another one of our trade shows. I don't know where it's going to be coming up. It's been in Las Vegas. It's been in New Orleans. Those are the two that stick in my head.
Do you interact with other ambulance manufacturers at these and kind of like trade ideas and stuff, or is it kind
Well,
of
no.
you can go
Generally,
look
you
at them?
don't trade ideas. It's one of those where Lifeline people go down and you just walk around the show and you see things and it's I tell people if you ever have a chance to go to FDIC, go, because you look at Lifeline, their claim to fame is our quality and our fit and our finish. And, we're second to none. And you go to a place like World EMS Expo or you go to FDIC and you look at these trucks and the gaps on the doors aren't even. The paint job, you can see the orange peel in the paint job. And you're like, really? That's the best you could do, to take to a national show. And it's really kind of eye opening to see what we do compared to what everybody else does. And we do make a difference. There's people that notice that, and that's one of the reasons why our back order and our backlog is such as it is.
Yeah, you mentioned that like you said, you're doing research on projects that are upcoming. So with that backlog being so long, what are the projects that you're working on now? Like, are those ones that aren't going to be actually manufactured for a long
Well,
time?
it's like when we look at like the ways we fabricate some of the things we do, what we're developing may not come into a truck for a year and a half. And so, technically we're doing up prints and drawings on chassis we haven't seen yet. we're just hoping Ford doesn't go, yeah, we're going to make something new for the 25 chassis year. And we're going, oh, well, that's going to be a problem. So, and we have, over the past couple of years, Ford has gotten a whole lot better about their hotline. Their customers and QVMs like us are able to reach out and actually get somebody at Ford who's not just an operator. It's somebody who can get that engineering question up the chain and get an answer to it. And we've worked through several problems with the Ford chassis by doing that, and it keeps getting better and better every year as they evolve it. So, yeah.
So I'm sure it sounds like you've been there since 2010, which is how long I've been with the company as well. So that's awesome. Um, I imagine Lifeline's not your entire life, though. Is
No,
there stuff that you enjoy doing or are involved with outside of work?
my grandson. We only have the one grandchild, and so it's my duty. I tell people all the time that have kids, you got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to keep your eye on the destination. If you don't murder your kids in their sleep, someday you'll get grandkids. And if I'd have known grandkids were this much fun, I'd have started with them. And so it's I do that. He and I enjoy uh, RC airplanes. We're both still learning. Uh, we've There's a website where you can download printable 3D printable planes, and he and I have done several of those because we have had what they call an unintended disassembly event, and so and that's a nice thing about having printed planes is you go, you print a new one, you put the motor and the controller in it, and you go back out and try again. So,
Yeah, that sounds great.
but
Cool. All right. Let's see. Is there anything else you want to talk about while we're here?
no, I mean it's amazing. It's been really fun to watch how Lifeline has expanded and grown ever since they were acquired by Folians. One of the things that a lot of people don't always understand is that when a company is held by a private individual, when that private individual either passes away or decides I don't want to do this anymore, a lot of times these small companies, they just kind of dry up and go away because the kids or the relatives don't have the passion, don't want to do it, and the fact that we got sold to a company like Foliance, we all get to stay in place because Connie and her husband could have sold Lifeline at any time to our competitors. All they'd had to do is pick up the phone and say, "I'm out. I want to sell," and they'd have gutted the plant, and everybody'd have been out of a job. But that's not what happened. And we were fortunate enough to become an ESOP. We were fortunate enough to be able to climb on that train and be part of that, and it makes us all stronger together. It allows us to have access to resources that we might not have access to if we were a small privately held company. And it ensures that we'll be here for a long time.
Yeah, no, definitely. It seems like it's worked out really well um, for Lifeline and for Cimarron and Gazette as well. And like you were talking about earlier, going to trade shows, you can tell in the quality of the product that
Mm-hmm.
you're putting out. Like it seems different. People care.
Yeah.
Like they have a stake.
Yep. And it's funny how when people have a say or they've got skin in the game, it's not just I go to job, I go home. It's I have a direct effect on the financial well-being of this company. And that was kind of a long road for some of the people to learn. It's like this directly affects this, and so if we're being wasteful and we're cutting off and wasting too much wire, that affects our bottom end. And people are starting to understand that. They're starting to say, okay, there's a better way to do this. I'll bring this up. And a lot of times, yeah, by all means, it's a better way to do it. Let's write it up. And that's all part of being a family and being involved, having skin in the game.
Awesome. Yeah, that sums it up.
It does.
All right, Jake. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I
It's
think it
been a
was great.
pleasure. Thank you very much, Sean, for having me. I look forward to hearing other podcasts.
Yeah, just keep chugging
Keep
on.
chugging on, man.
Thanks for listening to ESOPOD. If you want to get in touch, send me an email at esopod@foliance.com.